My friend came to my house at 2 in the morning because I had found out my husband was cheating. She held me in my kitchen, made me tea, and told me I had to be strong. Then I accidentally saw a message on her phone. It was from my husband. And it said, "She already suspects something. We need to move faster now." My name is Claire. I was 37 years old, and until that night, I truly believed there were two people in my life I could lean on. My husband, Daniel, and my best friend, Megan. Daniel had been with me for 11 years. We lived in a quiet suburb of Charlotte, in a regular two-story house with a white fence, a 25-year mortgage, and neighbors who always knew more than they admitted. Megan had been in my life even before my marriage. She was the first person I called. After a fight. After bad news. After every moment when it felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. So when I found a motel receipt in the pocket of Daniel's jacket, my hands called her before my mind could stop them. The motel was not in another city. It was 15 minutes from our house. The receipt was dated last Wednesday. The same evening Daniel had said he was staying late at the office because of problems with a client. He came home after midnight that night, kissed my forehead, and smelled like someone else's soap. Back then, I forced myself to swallow that feeling. Women often do that when they are afraid of the truth. Megan arrived fast. Too fast, as I understand now. She did not ask for my address, did not ask for details, and did not sound surprised. She only said she was already on her way, and 20 minutes later, her car was parked outside our porch. She was wearing a gray tracksuit and a black coat. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her face tired but focused. She looked like someone who had dropped everything for me. That was why I let her in without a second thought. The kitchen was dark, with only the small light above the stove giving off a warm glow. The receipt lay on the table, flattened by my damp fingers. Beside it sat a cup of cold coffee I had never managed to drink. Megan picked up the receipt and stared at it for a long time. Her face barely changed. Only her jaw tightened for 1 second. At the time, I thought she was angry for me. Now I understand she was counting how much I already knew. She made tea, sat me down at the table, and covered my shoulders with a blanket. Everything felt so familiar, so gentle, so right, that I allowed myself to fall apart. I talked about Daniel, about his cold eyes, about the late phone calls, about the new password on his phone. I remembered every small detail that had been cutting me open for months, but had never seemed enough to accuse him. Megan listened almost silently, and that silence felt like support. Sometimes she touched my hand. Sometimes she nodded. Once or twice, she told me I should not let him break me. It hurts now to remember how much I trusted her. Because in that exact moment, while I was crying in front of her, her phone was lying face up near the sink. It lit up by accident. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a short flash in the dark kitchen. At first, I did not want to look. It was her phone, her privacy, her life. Even in my panic, I was still trying to be a decent person. But the name on the screen stopped my breathing. Daniel. My husband. Before I tell you what was actually in that message, subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Because this story is about how dangerous it can be to mistake support for control and closeness for the right to know every weak place inside you. I did not pick up the phone right away. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, as if my mind refused to put the obvious pieces together. Megan was standing with her back to me, stirring the tea for so long that it almost felt like she was waiting for me to see exactly what I was meant to see. Then the message expanded across the locked screen. One sentence. Short, cold, and more terrifying than any scream. She already suspects something. We need to move faster now. The floor felt like it disappeared beneath my feet. Not because of the affair. The affair was already lying on the table in the form of a motel receipt. What broke me was the word move. Because it meant they were not just hiding a romance. They had a plan. Megan turned around at the exact moment I was holding her phone in my hand. Her face went empty. No guilt. No shock. No trace of the friend I had known for almost 15 years. Then the front door creaked in the hallway. Daniel had come home. And in that moment, I understood the most frightening thing. They both knew I was going to find that receipt. For 1 second, Nobody moved. Megan stood near the stove with her hand still wrapped around the spoon. Daniel stayed in the hallway, half hidden by the shadow near the front door. And I stood between them, holding her phone like it had burned straight through my skin. The house felt too quiet. Not peaceful. Trapped. I remember noticing ridiculous little things in that moment. The low hum of the refrigerator. The smell of oversteeped tea. The porch light spilling across Daniel's shoes. Megan's breathing, soft but uneven, like she was trying not to look afraid. But she was not afraid of hurting me. She was afraid of being caught too soon. Daniel walked into the kitchen slowly. His eyes moved from my face to the phone, then to Megan. There was no confusion in him. No surprise. That small detail told me more than any confession could have. They already knew the scene was possible. Maybe they had planned for it. Maybe this was only the part where I was supposed to break. My first instinct was to scream, but nothing came out. The shock was too clean, too sharp. It did not feel like anger yet. It felt like my mind had stepped outside my body and was watching a stranger's marriage collapse under a kitchen light. Megan reached toward me, not for comfort. For the phone. That simple movement made everything inside me turn cold. She still thought she could manage me. Even after I had seen the message. Even with Daniel standing there like a man waiting for instructions. I stepped back and put the phone against my chest. Her expression changed for the first time. A tiny flash of irritation crossed her face, quick enough to miss, but I saw it. That was the first crack. For years, Megan had looked gentle, warm, loyal. She remembered birthdays, brought soup when I was sick, and knew exactly when to text me after a bad day. People like that do not seem dangerous, because their weapons are soft. Hers were concern, timing, and access. Daniel finally said my name, but it sounded wrong. Too careful. Too rehearsed. He used the voice he used with angry clients when he wanted to sound calm without actually caring. I looked at him and realized I had heard that voice for months. At dinner. In bed. On Sunday mornings when I asked why he seemed distant. Every time he told me I was imagining things, he had been using his work voice on his wife. That thought almost made me laugh. Instead, I placed Megan's phone on the table and pushed it away from her. Not far. Just enough to make it clear I was not handing it back because she asked. The message was still glowing on the screen. She already suspects something. We need to move faster now. Those words became a wall between us. Daniel stared at them like he hated that they existed. Megan looked at me like I had done something rude by reading them. For the first time that night, I understood how lonely I really was. Not because my marriage was failing. Not because my friend had betrayed me. Because both of them had been standing inside my life, using my trust like a spare key. The motel receipt was not an accident. That thought arrived slowly, then settled deep. I looked down at the table. The receipt was placed perfectly in the center, almost too visible. I had found it in Daniel's jacket only after he left the jacket hanging in the hallway instead of putting it in the bedroom closet. He never did that. Not once in 11 years. Daniel was careless with emotions, but never with evidence. My stomach tightened. Megan had arrived too quickly. Daniel had come home right after the message. The receipt had been too easy to find. Pieces began sliding together, and none of them made sense in a normal way. This was not just cheating. It was something arranged, something meant to push me into a reaction. They wanted me upset. Maybe loud. Maybe desperate. Maybe unstable. A few months earlier, Daniel had started talking about how stressed I seemed. At first, it sounded like concern. Then he said it in front of other people. At a neighborhood barbecue, he joked that I checked his location like a detective. I laughed because everyone else laughed. That memory now tasted bitter. Megan had been there too. She had touched my shoulder and smiled like she was on my side. Later, she told me I needed to be careful. Not because Daniel was cruel, she said, but because men could twist emotional reactions against women. At the time, it sounded like advice. Now it sounded like preparation. Daniel moved closer to the table, and my body reacted before my mind did. I grabbed the receipt, my phone, and my car keys in one motion. My hands were shaking, but some quiet part of me had woken up. The part that knew crying would not save me. Megan's softness disappeared. Her voice stayed low, but the warmth was gone. She told me I was exhausted. Daniel said I needed to sit down. Neither of them asked what I needed. That was another answer. I backed out of the kitchen. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. Behind me, their silence was worse than footsteps. They were thinking, adjusting, deciding what version of me they would describe to other people if I walked out that door. Crazy, paranoid, unstable, heartbroken. All the words women get handed when someone wants their truth to sound messy. I reached the front door and opened it before either of them could touch me. The cold air hit my face hard. For 1 second, I almost turned back. Not because I trusted them. Because leaving my own house at 3 in the morning felt impossible. My purse was still upstairs. My wedding ring was still on my finger. My life was still inside those walls. But then I heard Megan behind me. Not crying. Not apologizing. Whispering Daniel's name like they had no time left. So I ran to my car barefoot. The driveway stones cut into my feet, but pain felt useful. Real. Honest. I locked the doors the moment I got inside and started the engine with shaking fingers. Through the kitchen window, I saw them standing together. Not separated by guilt. Together. Daniel had his hand on Megan's shoulder. And she was looking at me with an expression I will never forget. Not regret. Calculation. I drove without knowing where I was going. The streets were empty, washed pale by streetlights and early morning fog. My phone kept buzzing on the passenger seat, but I did not touch it. Every vibration felt like a hook being thrown back into me. After 10 minutes, I pulled into the parking lot of a closed pharmacy. My breath came fast, too fast, and my hands hurt from gripping the wheel. Only then did I look at my phone. There were 6 missed calls from Daniel, 4 from Megan, and 1 voicemail from an unknown number. I should have ignored it. But something in me already knew the night was not finished. I pressed play. A woman's voice came through the speaker, quiet and trembling. She said she worked at the motel from the receipt. Then she said my name. And after that, she told me Daniel had not been there with Megan. He had been there to meet a lawyer. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood the voicemail completely. My mind was still trapped inside the first version of the story. Daniel had cheated, Megan had helped him hide it, and the motel receipt was the ugly little proof that finally slipped out of his pocket. But the woman from the motel had not said Megan's name. She said Daniel had met with a lawyer. Then she said something that made the steering wheel feel cold under my hands. The lawyer had not checked in under his own name. Daniel had paid cash for the room, stayed less than an hour, and left behind a folder near the nightstand. The motel employee found my name written across the top page. That was why she called me. She said she knew it was not her business, but the papers looked serious. There were printed bank statements, copies of our mortgage documents, and notes about mental health concerns in a divorce file. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. The affair was suddenly not the center of the room anymore. It was only the smoke. Somewhere behind it, something much larger had already caught fire. I replayed the voicemail 3 times in that dark pharmacy parking lot. Each time, the words sounded worse. Mental health concerns. Mortgage documents. Bank statements. My name printed like a problem someone was trying to solve. Daniel had been building a case against me. Megan had been helping him gather the pieces. That explained the strange little comments from the past few months. Daniel asking whether I had slept enough, but only when someone else could hear. Megan suggesting I seemed anxious, then sending long messages afterward like she was documenting my replies. Both of them acting gentle while quietly shaping a version of me that looked unstable. The thought made my skin prickle. I was not just being betrayed. I was being prepared for something. My phone buzzed again, and this time the screen showed Daniel's name. I let it ring until the call died, then watched Megan's name appear immediately after. The timing was too perfect, like they were standing in the same room taking turns. That image hurt more than I expected. For years, I had trusted Megan with the private language of my marriage. I told her when Daniel felt distant, when our bills made me nervous, when I worried I had become boring or invisible. She listened to every confession, then carried those pieces back to him. Every weakness I had shown her had become useful. After a few minutes, I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. At first, everything looked normal. Our checking account still showed the same balance from earlier that week. The mortgage payment had cleared. The electric bill was scheduled for Friday. Then I checked the savings account. A cold, empty number stared back at me. The balance was almost zero. There should have been more than $42,000 there. It was money from my late mother's life insurance, money I had kept separate in my mind even after I placed it in our joint savings. Daniel always called it our emergency cushion, but I still thought of it as the last piece of my mother protecting me. Now only $312 remained. The transfer had happened 2 days earlier. It had gone into an account I did not recognize. My hands started shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. In one night, my husband had become a stranger, my best friend had become a threat, and my safety net had disappeared into an account with a name I had never seen before. I opened the transfer details and saw something worse. The recipient account was connected to a small consulting business. Megan's consulting business. She had started it the year before after leaving her job at a dental office. I remembered helping her design the simple website, proofreading the About page, and telling her she was brave for starting over. She cried at my kitchen table that night and said she did not know what she would do without me. That memory turned my stomach. Daniel had moved my mother's money to Megan. Not slowly. Not accidentally. All at once. A part of me wanted to drive back to the house and demand answers, but another part finally understood the trap. If I returned screaming, they could use it. If I broke something, they could photograph it. If I threatened them, they could repeat it later with calmer voices and cleaner clothes. So I sat there, barefoot in my car, forcing myself to become quiet. Quiet did not mean weak anymore. Quiet meant I was still thinking. I took screenshots of the transfer, the voicemail, the motel receipt, and every missed call. Then I sent everything to my work email, my sister's email, and a new folder in my cloud storage. I had never thought of myself as strategic, but fear was teaching me quickly. Around 4 in the morning, a new text appeared from Megan. She wrote that Daniel was worried about me and that I had scared them by running out. Her words looked soft on the screen, almost caring, but now I could see the shape beneath them. She was creating a record. She wanted me to answer emotionally. She needed me to sound unstable in writing. For the first time that night, I did not give her what she wanted. I typed one careful sentence saying I was safe and needed space. Then I turned off my location sharing. That small action felt like cutting a wire. A minute later, Daniel called again. This time, he left a voicemail. His voice was gentle, almost sad, and that frightened me more than anger would have. He said he did not know what Megan had told me, but he was concerned about my state of mind. He said I had been under pressure for months, and he only wanted to make sure I did not hurt myself. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. There it was. The first official version of the lie. He was not defending himself as a cheating husband. He was positioning himself as a worried spouse. Megan was not my betrayer in their story. She was the loyal friend who had tried to help me during an emotional break. Suddenly, I understood why the receipt had been planted. They wanted me to find it. They wanted me to panic. They wanted my reaction to become their evidence. The pharmacy parking lot felt too exposed, so I started the car again. My feet ached against the pedals, and my throat burned from holding back tears, but I drove toward the one place Daniel would not expect me to go. I went to the motel. By the time I arrived, the sky was turning gray over the highway. The motel looked cheap and tired, with flickering lights along the walkway and a vending machine humming near the office. I parked near the back, pulled my coat tighter around me, and walked inside like someone who still had a right to ask questions. The woman at the front desk recognized my name before I finished speaking. She looked nervous, then slid a manila folder across the counter without another word. I wanted to ask why she had kept it, but her face told me she already regretted getting involved. Inside the folder were copies of our financial records, printed emails, and several pages of notes written in Daniel's neat handwriting. Most of them were about me. He had written down dates when I cried, dates when I called him too many times, dates when I questioned where he had been. Normal pain had been turned into symptoms. Normal suspicion had been turned into paranoia. Normal fear had been organized into a timeline. Then I found one page that made the room tilt around me. At the top, Daniel had written Megan's name. Under it, in careful bullet points, he had listed what she was supposed to say if anyone asked about my behavior. And at the bottom of the page, there was one sentence circled twice. After Claire signs the house agreement, move the rest of the money. The circled sentence at the bottom of the page changed everything I thought I understood. After Claire signs the house agreement, move the rest of the money. I read it once, then again, waiting for the words to turn into something less horrifying. They did not. The sentence stayed there in Daniel's careful handwriting, neat and calm, like he had been planning a grocery list instead of the quiet destruction of my life. Until that moment, I had thought they were trying to hide an affair. Now I understood they were trying to take the house. The motel lobby smelled like old coffee, floor cleaner, and damp carpet. Outside, traffic was beginning to build on the road, but inside that little office, the world felt strangely still. The woman behind the desk kept her eyes lowered, pretending not to watch me fall apart. I turned another page in the folder and found a printed draft of a legal agreement. My name was on the first line. Daniel's name was on the second. The document said I would temporarily give him full control over our shared property and major financial decisions because I was emotionally unwell and needed time to recover. My hands went numb around the paper. There were blanks where my signature should have gone. Beside one of the blanks, Daniel had written a note to himself about presenting it gently. He had written that I trusted Megan more than anyone and that she should be present when I signed. That was the moment the truth finally sharpened. Megan was not just sleeping with my husband. She was supposed to help convince me to sign away my life. A strange calm came over me after that. It was not peace. It was the kind of stillness that appears when panic becomes too large for the body to carry. I photographed every page, careful to capture Daniel's handwriting, the dates, the bank records, and the notes about Megan. The motel clerk watched me in silence, her face pale under the fluorescent light. I could tell she wanted me to leave quickly. Maybe she was afraid Daniel would come back. Maybe she was afraid she had already done too much. I did not blame her, but I could not rush. Those pages were the first real proof that I was not imagining things. For months, Daniel had made me feel dramatic for noticing distance. Megan had made me feel fragile for asking questions. Together, they had built a cage out of concern, then waited for me to walk into it. While I stood there, another memory pushed its way up. 2 weeks earlier, Megan had suggested I take a short break somewhere quiet. She said I looked exhausted, and a weekend away might help me breathe. Daniel had agreed too quickly. He even offered to book a small cabin outside Asheville, far from neighbors, family, and anyone who might notice if I sounded frightened. At the time, their concern had felt overwhelming. Now it looked like rehearsal. The folder contained a calendar page with several dates marked in red. One date was circled for the following Friday. Under it, Daniel had written 3 words inside a longer note about paperwork, timing, and emotional pressure. The words were simple. Cabin weekend agreement. My stomach twisted so hard I had to lean against the counter. They had not planned to wait months. They had planned to do it that weekend. I thought about the cabin, the quiet roads, the poor cell service, and Megan sitting beside me with that soft voice she used when she wanted me to doubt myself. Daniel would have been patient. She would have been gentle. They would have framed it as protection, rest, and temporary help until I felt stronger. By Monday, my name could have been on a document I barely understood. My mother's money was already gone, and the house would have been next. That was the moment I realized this was absolutely insane, because their cruelty had not been impulsive or messy. It was organized, patient, and hidden under the exact language people use when they pretend to care. I left the motel with the folder tucked under my coat. The morning air felt cold against my face, and for the first time all night, I understood that going home alone would be dangerous. Not because Daniel had ever hit me. That would have been easier to explain. The danger was cleaner than that. He knew how to sound reasonable, and Megan knew how to sound loving. Together, they could make almost anything look like concern. I drove to my sister Rachel's apartment on the other side of Charlotte. We were not as close as we had been when we were younger, mostly because Daniel never liked her directness. He always said she was too intense, too suspicious, too involved in my business. Now I wondered if that was exactly why he had kept me away from her. Rachel opened the door in an old college sweatshirt, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her face changing the second she saw me barefoot with a folder pressed to my chest. I did not explain everything at once. The story was too ugly to fit into one breath. Instead, I handed her the papers. She read silently at first. Then her expression hardened in a way that made me feel less alone than any comforting words could have. Rachel had always been the person who saw danger before other people admitted it existed. Within an hour, she had made coffee, given me socks, and placed my phone on the table between us. We listened to Daniel's voicemail together. Then we listened to Megan's. Hearing their voices in Rachel's apartment made the manipulation even clearer. Daniel sounded like a worried husband. Megan sounded like a frightened friend. Neither of them sounded guilty. Rachel told me not to answer anything without saving it first. She photographed the folder again, uploaded copies to her own account, and wrote down every date I could remember. Her calmness gave shape to mine. Around 7:30, a new message appeared from Daniel. He wrote that he had called the police because he was worried about my safety. My blood went cold. Then another message arrived from Megan, longer and softer than his. She said she loved me, that I was scaring everyone, and that Daniel only wanted to make sure I was okay. I stared at those messages and finally saw the trap closing. They were not waiting for Friday anymore. They had started that morning. Rachel was already reaching for her keys when a sharp knock landed on her apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing in the hallway. Behind them stood Megan, crying into a tissue like she had been the one betrayed. Seeing Megan behind those officers almost made me understand how the trap worked. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped in a cream sweater, her face wet, her shoulders trembling in a way that would have fooled anyone who did not know what I had just found. To the officers, she probably looked like a loyal friend who had followed a frightened woman across town because she cared too much to stay home. To me, she looked like the person who had learned my pain well enough to perform it. Rachel opened the door before I could stop her. She did not look scared, and that alone seemed to unsettle Megan. My sister stood there with one hand on the doorframe, calm and steady, while I stayed behind her with the folder pressed against my ribs. The officers asked for me by name. Their voices were polite, but the air changed immediately. I could feel the weight of Daniel's story already standing between us. He had called them first. He had used the right words. Worried wife. Emotional episode. Sudden disappearance. Possible danger to herself. It sounded careful because it was. Rachel let them see me, but she did not let them take control of the room. She explained that I was safe, sober, and with family. Then she told them I had evidence of financial abuse and possible coercion. Megan made a soft sound behind them. Not loud enough to seem dramatic. Just enough to pull attention back to her. That was her gift. She knew how to become the wounded center of a room without ever looking forceful. For years, I had mistaken that softness for kindness. Now I understood it was also a tool. One officer asked whether I would speak with them alone. My first instinct was fear, because Daniel had already turned my emotions into evidence. But Rachel quietly placed the folder on the entry table, open to the page with Daniel's handwriting and Megan's name. The officer looked down before Megan could stop him. His expression shifted only slightly. That tiny change gave me enough strength to speak. I kept my voice even. No crying. No shouting. No long explanations that could make me sound scattered. I told them I had left my home because I found messages suggesting my husband and best friend were planning something against me. Then I showed the bank transfer, the motel receipt, and the notes about making me sign a house agreement. Megan kept crying behind them. Daniel was not there, but his voice was everywhere. In the voicemail. In the messages. In the careful phrases about my state of mind. I played the recording where he said he was worried I might hurt myself, and the officer listened with the kind of face people use when they are trying not to decide too soon. That was when Megan stepped closer. She said she loved me and only wanted me safe. Her voice trembled in all the right places, but her eyes kept dropping to the folder. Not to me. Not to my face. To the evidence. That small detail steadied me more than anything else. She was not afraid for me. She was afraid of paper. Rachel noticed it too. She moved the folder farther inside the apartment, away from the doorway, and asked the officers to make sure nobody touched it. Megan's lips tightened for less than a second. It was fast, but not fast enough. The officers did not arrest anyone that morning. Real life rarely moves like a movie, and painful truth does not become justice the second you say it out loud. They took notes, asked questions, and told me to contact an attorney immediately. One of them advised me not to return home alone. That sentence landed heavily, because it meant someone outside my fear finally saw danger. Megan tried one last time before leaving. She looked at me with red eyes and said Daniel was waiting at home, sick with worry. The old version of me might have felt guilty. She had trained that guilt into me for years, one gentle concern at a time. But I only looked at her hands. Her nails were perfect. Her wedding finger was bare. Her phone was tucked tight against her palm, like it held the rest of the plan. After they left, Rachel locked the door and turned the deadbolt twice. The apartment felt different after that. Smaller, but safer. My body finally started to shake, not from weakness, but from the delayed shock of realizing how close I had come to handing them everything. By 9 that morning, Rachel had found a family attorney who agreed to see me the same day. I did not shower. I borrowed her clothes, pulled my hair back, and carried the folder like it was the only solid object left in my life. The attorney's office was downtown, inside a glass building that smelled like expensive coffee and printer ink. I expected judgment when I told the story. Instead, the attorney listened with a still face and wrote down every detail. When she reached the bank transfer, she stopped writing. That was the first time I saw real alarm. She explained that because the money had been in a joint account, recovering it would be complicated, but the timing and destination mattered. A transfer to Megan's business, paired with the draft house agreement and Daniel's notes, could show intent. It was not enough by itself to fix everything, but it was enough to start protecting me. For the first time since 2 in the morning, the word protection belonged to me. The attorney told me not to communicate with Daniel or Megan directly. She helped me prepare an emergency request to prevent changes to the house, freeze certain accounts, and document the missing money. Rachel sat beside me the whole time, quiet and fierce. Then the attorney asked whether Daniel had access to my email, cloud storage, or phone records. My stomach dropped. I remembered every password I had ever shared. Every device Daniel had set up for me. Every time Megan had borrowed my phone to help me write a calm message. Access was not just a convenience anymore. It was a doorway. We changed passwords from the attorney's conference room. Bank accounts, email, cloud storage, phone carrier, everything I could remember. Each new password felt like a small lock sliding into place. Halfway through, my work email opened. At the top of my inbox was a message I had not sent. The subject line made my blood go cold. It said, "I'm sorry for what I did." The email was addressed to Daniel, Megan, Rachel, and my manager at work. Attached to it was a document titled Claire's Statement. My hands went numb as the attorney opened it. The first line said I had lied about Daniel because I was unstable, jealous, and ashamed. And at the bottom of the page, someone had already typed my full legal name. The document on the screen looked like something written by a stranger who had studied my fears. It said I had accused Daniel because I was jealous. It said Megan had only tried to help me through a breakdown. It said I had taken money from our savings during an emotional episode, then blamed them when I regretted it. Every sentence was clean, calm, and poisonous. The worst part was the tone. Whoever wrote it had not made me sound hysterical. They had made me sound ashamed, tired, and believable. It was the kind of apology people would accept quickly because it made their own discomfort disappear. My attorney did not react with shock. She leaned closer to the screen and asked whether the email had actually been sent. Rachel checked the outbox, then the sent folder, then the account activity page. Her face tightened before she turned the laptop toward the attorney. The email had been scheduled. It was set to go out at noon. Someone had written my confession before I even knew I needed to defend myself. They were not only stealing money and preparing legal papers. They were preparing my voice, my guilt, and my public humiliation. I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Daniel had kissed my forehead for years while learning how to erase me. Megan had sat at my kitchen table while learning how to imitate me. Together, they had built a version of Claire that could be displayed whenever the real one became inconvenient. The attorney told Rachel to disconnect the laptop from the internet immediately. Then she called someone from her office who handled digital evidence. While we waited, I stared at that scheduled email and tried not to imagine my manager reading it. My job was one of the few things Daniel had never fully controlled. I worked as an office administrator for a small medical supply company. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. My paycheck went into the household, my benefits helped cover us, and my coworkers knew me as steady. If that email reached them, Daniel would not just damage my marriage. He would damage my credibility. That realization pushed something new through me. Not rage exactly, but refusal. I had spent months explaining, doubting, apologizing, softening myself so everyone else could stay comfortable. Now every quiet choice felt dangerous. Every polite silence had given them more room. The digital evidence specialist arrived less than an hour later. He was calm, practical, and careful with every click. He did not promise miracles, and I was grateful for that. I had lost patience for people who sounded gentle while hiding sharp edges. He found the first sign quickly. The scheduled email had been created from an IP address connected to our home network. The login happened at 3:21 that morning, while I was already gone. Another login appeared 15 minutes later from Megan's phone. The room went very still around me. For the first time, the proof did not depend on my memory or my pain. It was not about how something felt, or what I suspected, or whether I looked calm enough while explaining it. There were timestamps, devices, access records, a trail they had not cleaned fast enough. The attorney printed everything. Then she had me write a short statement in my own words, with Rachel present and the specialist documenting the device activity. It was not emotional. It was not dramatic. It simply said I had not written the scheduled email, had not authorized the bank transfer, and was requesting immediate preservation of account records. That page felt different from Daniel's fake confession. It sounded like me, but stronger. Around noon, while the fake email sat frozen in my outbox, Daniel sent another message. He said he understood I was embarrassed and that he would forgive me if I came home before this became public. The kindness in his words made my skin crawl. He was still trying to make surrender look like love. Megan sent nothing for almost an hour, which frightened me more than her messages had. Silence from her meant adjustment. It meant she was speaking somewhere else, shaping another room before I entered it. By early afternoon, the emergency filing was in motion. My attorney requested a temporary order preventing Daniel from selling, refinancing, or changing anything connected to the house. She also asked for records tied to the transfer into Megan's business account. The law did not move as fast as my fear wanted. Still, for the first time, it moved in my direction. Rachel drove me back to the house with 2 officers present. I did not want to go, but I needed clothes, medication, my passport, and the small box of my mother's jewelry from the bedroom closet. Leaving those things behind felt like leaving proof of myself inside enemy territory. The house looked painfully normal from the street. Our hanging baskets still swayed beside the porch. The welcome mat was crooked in the same way it always was. A delivery package sat near the door, ridiculous and ordinary, as if the life behind it had not cracked open before sunrise. Daniel opened the door before anyone knocked. He looked tired, unshaven, and perfectly wounded. That was the face he had chosen for outsiders. He did not raise his voice or block the entrance. Instead, he stepped aside with sad patience, like a husband allowing his troubled wife to collect herself. I hated how convincing he was. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner. That detail stopped me. Daniel never cleaned when he was upset. He paced, drank coffee, and left every light on. The kitchen counters had been wiped down. The trash bag was missing. The table where the receipt had been lying was bare. He had been cleaning the scene, not the house. I kept my eyes forward and went upstairs with Rachel beside me. The officers stayed close enough to hear us, which made Daniel's calmness thinner. In the bedroom, my closet door was open. My suitcase was already on the floor, packed. A folded sweater sat on top, along with my passport and a bottle of anxiety medication I had stopped taking 2 years earlier. I stared at the suitcase while every part of me went cold again. They had planned this image too. A wife leaving in the middle of a breakdown. A passport ready. Medication visible. A suitcase prepared before anyone asked why. It was so staged that I almost admired the discipline, and that thought made me want to scrub my own skin. Rachel photographed everything before I touched it. Daniel appeared in the hallway and said nothing. His silence felt practiced, but his eyes flicked toward the officers too often. He knew the performance was not landing the way he wanted. Then Rachel opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written across it. The handwriting was Megan's. My attorney had told me not to read anything without documenting it first, so Rachel photographed the envelope before opening it. Inside was a printed copy of the house agreement from the motel folder. This version was different. At the bottom, above the signature line, someone had already signed my name. The signature at the bottom of the agreement looked almost like mine. That was what made it so disturbing. It had the same long loop on the C, the same tilted letters, and the same little break before my last name. Someone had practiced it. Someone had studied the way I signed birthday cards, bank forms, and Christmas checks for nieces and nephews. For a few seconds, I could not even feel my hands. Rachel photographed the page from every angle before slipping it back into the envelope. One of the officers stepped closer, and Daniel's calm face finally began to change. It was not a dramatic collapse. It was smaller than that, almost invisible, but I saw the truth flicker through him. He had expected me to look unstable. He had not expected me to arrive with witnesses. The officer asked whether I had signed that document. I kept my answer simple, because my attorney's voice was already in my head, reminding me not to over-explain. I said I had never seen that version before, and I had never given anyone permission to sign my name. Daniel looked toward the bedroom window instead of looking at me. That one movement felt like another confession. Megan was not in the house, but her presence was everywhere. Her handwriting was on the envelope. Her business account had received my mother's money. Her phone had logged into my email after I fled. For years, she had seemed like the friend standing beside me during every crisis, yet now I saw she had been standing close enough to copy the shape of my life. I collected my passport, medication, work laptop, and the small wooden box that held my mother's jewelry. The box was still in the closet, but the cash tucked beneath the velvet lining was gone. It had only been $800, emergency money my mother had once told me every woman should keep for herself. The empty space beneath that lining hurt more than I expected. Daniel had not only taken money from an account. He had reached into the last private corner my mother had left me. Rachel noticed my face and photographed the box too. Her quietness kept me from breaking. She had a way of turning pain into steps, and that was exactly what I needed because feelings could wait, but evidence could disappear. Before we left, I looked around the bedroom one last time. The bed was made. My side table was wiped clean. Even the framed photo from our trip to Savannah had been turned slightly toward the wall, as if Daniel could not stand being watched by the version of us that used to exist. The house felt staged, but not alive. That realization helped me walk out. By late afternoon, I was back in Rachel's apartment, sitting beside a window while my attorney reviewed the new photographs. She did not sound surprised when we told her about the signed agreement. That scared me at first, until I understood that surprise was not useful in her world. She cared about dates, records, signatures, and who had access. The emergency request became stronger because of that forged page. Within hours, Daniel was temporarily blocked from changing the mortgage, transferring property interest, or moving major assets. The order was not a final victory, but it was the first wall between me and the plan they had built around my silence. The bank also opened a fraud review on the transfer to Megan's business. That part was complicated because the account had been joint and Daniel had authorization to move money. Still, the attorney explained that intent mattered. The fake agreement, the scheduled confession, the notes from the motel folder, and Megan's business account created a pattern. Pattern became the word that saved me. One betrayal could be explained away. A pattern could not. That evening, my manager called me after receiving my attorney's notice about the attempted email. I was terrified before answering, expecting confusion or doubt. Instead, she sounded careful and human. She confirmed no message had gone out, told me my job was safe, and asked me to keep communication in writing until things settled. I cried after that call, but not because I was weak. I cried because one part of my life had not been successfully poisoned. Megan finally broke her silence after sunset. The message came from a new number, probably because I had blocked the old one. It was long, emotional, and beautifully written in the exact way she used to write birthday cards. She said Daniel had manipulated her too. She said she was scared of him. She said the money transfer was supposed to protect funds until I calmed down. I read the message twice without answering. The old Claire would have searched for the wounded part of her. She would have wondered whether Megan was also a victim, whether friendship could still be found under all that damage. That instinct had kept me trapped for years, confusing empathy with access. This time, I forwarded the message to my attorney. No reply. No comfort. No open door. The next morning, Rachel drove me to the courthouse for the emergency hearing. I wore borrowed black flats, a navy blouse, and the only coat I had grabbed from the house. My feet still had small cuts from running across the driveway barefoot, and every step reminded me how the night had begun. Daniel was already there when we arrived. Megan sat beside him. That almost made me laugh, because even after everything, they still thought showing up together would look like unity instead of proof. She wore soft makeup and a pale blue dress, dressed like someone who wanted the room to believe she had been crying responsibly. Daniel looked exhausted in the way guilty men sometimes look when they are angry they have consequences. Inside the courtroom, their version sounded polished. Daniel's attorney painted him as a concerned husband trying to protect shared assets during my emotional spiral. Megan was described as a family friend who had been dragged into a private marital crisis. Then my attorney presented the timeline. The motel folder. The planted receipt. The bank transfer. The login records. The scheduled confession. The forged signature. One by one, their calm little story became harder to hold together. Daniel's face stayed controlled until the bank transfer appeared on the screen. Megan's business name was right there, attached to the money my mother had left behind. For the first time since I had known her, Megan looked genuinely afraid. Not sad, not caring, not wounded. Afraid. The judge did not decide everything that day, because real life rarely gives you a clean ending when you need one most. But she extended the temporary protections, ordered preservation of financial records, and warned Daniel not to contact me outside attorneys. Then she turned to the issue of the forged agreement. Her face hardened as she reviewed the signature page. By the time we left the courtroom, Daniel would no longer look at me. Megan tried once, but I turned away before her eyes could pull me back into the old habit of feeling responsible for her pain. Outside, Rachel touched my arm and guided me toward the parking lot. For the first time, I thought I might actually survive this. Then my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown email address. There was no text in the body, only one attachment. It was a video from my kitchen, recorded the night Megan came over, and the thumbnail showed me crying at the table while Megan stood behind me with my phone in her hand. The video attachment sat on my screen like another door I did not want to open. Rachel saw my face change before I could explain. She took one look at the thumbnail, then told me to forward it to my attorney before touching anything else. A week earlier, I would have opened it immediately, desperate for answers and terrified of waiting. Now I understood that every answer needed to be protected before it could help me. We stood in the courthouse parking lot while my hands hovered over the phone. The thumbnail showed my own kitchen from a high corner angle. I recognized the view because Daniel had installed that small indoor camera months earlier after a few packages disappeared from porches in our neighborhood. He told me it only faced the back door. He told me it was for safety. That word had become almost funny to me. By the time we reached the attorney's office, the video had been downloaded, copied, and preserved. My attorney played it from her conference room screen while Rachel sat beside me with one hand resting near my elbow, not touching me, just close enough to remind me I was not alone. The recording began before Megan arrived. I was already at the kitchen table with the motel receipt in front of me. My shoulders were shaking. My face was swollen from crying. It hurt to watch myself like that, not because I looked weak, but because I could see how completely alone I believed I was. Then Megan walked in. She moved through my kitchen like she belonged there. She made tea, found the blanket, placed herself beside me, and performed every gesture of comfort with a smoothness that made my stomach turn. From that angle, the whole scene looked almost tender. Then everything changed. At one point, I left the table and went toward the hallway bathroom. I barely remembered doing it, but the video caught it clearly. Megan waited until I disappeared, then reached for my phone on the table. She turned it toward my chair, lifted it to the height of my face, and unlocked it while I was still crying nearby. That was when the room went silent around me. The camera showed her typing quickly. Not one message. Several. She opened my email, checked my contacts, and scrolled through my notes. Then she placed my phone back exactly where it had been, adjusted the blanket on my chair, and returned to the stove before I walked back in. She did not look nervous. That was what frightened me most. She looked practiced. A few minutes later, her own phone lit up near the sink. The same message I had seen appeared on the screen. Daniel's warning. The sentence about me already suspecting something and the need to move faster. The video caught Megan looking at it before I did. She saw the message, turned slightly, and left the phone facing upward. She wanted me to see it. My attorney paused the video there. Nobody spoke for several seconds. I stared at the frozen image of Megan's hand near the counter, the screen glowing beside her, my own body sitting only a few feet away from the truth. That was the moment I finally understood the whole design. The receipt was bait. The message was bait. My panic was supposed to be the product. They had planned to push me into fear, record the fallout, and use my reaction to support the story that I was unstable. If I screamed, they would have proof. If I grabbed the phone, they would have proof. If I ran, they would call it proof too. The cruelty was not only in what they did. It was in how well they knew me. They knew I would question myself before accusing anyone. They knew I would hesitate before reading a phone. They knew I would feel guilty for being suspicious, even while holding evidence in my hand. For years, I had called that kindness. Now I called it training. The video continued after Daniel came home. It showed him entering the kitchen, looking directly at Megan before looking at me. It showed the two of them standing too close while I backed toward the hallway. It showed Megan reaching for her phone, then whispering something to Daniel after I ran outside. There was no audio clear enough to catch every word, but the picture did not need much help. Their bodies told the story. My attorney requested information about the sender, but nobody recognized the email address. Later, the digital specialist found that the video came from a shared camera account Daniel had forgotten to disconnect from an old tablet. Someone had accessed it, downloaded the clip, and sent it to me. I never learned for certain who did it. Part of me suspected the motel clerk, because she had already crossed one line to warn me. Rachel thought it might have been someone Daniel contacted for help, someone who saw too much and did not want blood on their hands. My attorney told me not to build hope around strangers, but I quietly thanked that unknown person anyway. That video changed the direction of everything. It did not fix my life in one beautiful moment. Nothing happened that cleanly. But it made their story harder to sell, and once people saw the pattern, Daniel's calm voice stopped sounding protective. Megan's tears stopped looking like loyalty. The bank review deepened. The court ordered more records. Daniel's attorney stopped using the phrase emotional spiral. Megan's business account was frozen while investigators reviewed the transfer. The forged signature was sent for analysis, along with cards and documents she had handled over the years. I learned that betrayal can be intimate in ways people rarely imagine. Sometimes it is not just a body in a bed. Sometimes it is someone learning your handwriting, your passwords, your fears, and the exact tone of voice people will believe. The divorce took months. Those months were not cinematic. They were exhausting, expensive, and humiliating in quiet ways. I slept on Rachel's couch longer than I planned. I cried in grocery store parking lots. I froze every time I saw a cream sweater or smelled the tea Megan used to make in my kitchen. Healing was not a straight line. Still, it was movement. Eventually, part of my mother's money was recovered through the fraud review and settlement negotiations. Not all of it came back, and I had to make peace with that because peace was becoming more valuable than punishment. The house was sold under court supervision, and my share went into an account only I controlled. Daniel did not go to prison. Real life does not always give the ending people want. But he lost the version of himself he had worked so hard to protect. The records followed him through the divorce. The forged agreement, the scheduled confession, the camera footage, and the money trail became part of something he could not smile his way out of. Megan lost more than money. She lost access. That was the one thing people like her cannot stand. I blocked her everywhere, changed my number, changed my locks, and stopped letting guilt answer the door for me. Months later, she sent Rachel a letter, folded neatly with my name written on the front. Rachel asked whether I wanted it. For the first time in my life, I did not need to know. I told her to throw it away. A year later, I moved into a small townhouse on the other side of Charlotte. It did not have a white fence or a perfect kitchen, and the first few nights felt so quiet that I left the television on just to hear another voice. But every bill was mine. Every key was mine. Every password belonged only to me. The first morning I woke up there, sunlight came through the blinds in thin gold lines. I made coffee, sat on the floor because the furniture had not arrived yet, and cried harder than I had cried in months. Not because I missed Daniel. Not because I missed Megan. I cried because I had survived people who knew exactly where to hurt me. For a long time, I thought trust meant giving someone every part of you. Your fears, your passwords, your money, your secrets, your spare key, your forgiveness before they even earned it. I thought love meant proving I was not suspicious. I thought friendship meant never questioning someone who showed up when I cried. Now I know better. Trust without boundaries is not love. It is an unlocked door. I still believe good people exist, but I no longer hand them the map to every weak place inside me. I no longer confuse calm voices with honest hearts. When something feels wrong, I do not bury it just because the truth might be painful. Painful truth can save you. Comforting lies can cost you everything. Sometimes I still wonder how long they would have kept going if that video had never arrived. Maybe I would have signed the agreement at that cabin. Maybe everyone would have believed their careful story. Maybe my mother's money, my house, my work, and my name would have disappeared under a lie written in my own voice. That thought still visits me sometimes. But it does not own me anymore. Because in the end, Megan did not destroy my life the way she planned. Daniel did not get to turn my fear into his protection. They taught me a lesson I paid for in money, sleep, and trust, but they also taught me where my life had been leaking. I do not leave doors open now. And I do not apologize for checking the lock.